All right, Samantha here with Up to Speed, and we are joined by some pretty incredible gentlemen today talking about earthquake insurance. I mean, if I'm being honest, Glenn is basically what I like to call an insurance icon.
Oh, jeez.
We're going to introduce him, and Jerry is just another man who's spent a lot of years in the space, especially in the space of earthquake. So earthquake is such a hot topic, and I can't wait to jump in. So gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Samantha.
This is our first time we've had two guests at once, so it's going to be kind of interesting to really dive into the subject. But, you know, Glenn is with GeoVera now, but he has spent many years doing many cool things, one of which was being the CEO of the California Earthquake Authority, which I don't know if you know that or not, but that's a pretty big-time job.
It was a pretty big job, yeah.
Pretty big time.
Yeah.
But that's not even it for him, right? He was also a commissioner of North Dakota for 8 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, let's just talk about iconic, right? He knows a few things.
You're very kind.
Jerry's with Sature, and he has been in the earthquake space for how many years?
Going on 8 years already. So.
I mean, wow, guys, let's jump in. So, first of all, when we go on the TV, pretty much every other day, we hear about some shake, rattle, and rolling going on somewhere. Let's talk about earthquake and why they're happening and where they're happening. Who wants to jump in first?
I would say Glenn is...
Happy to give it a go.
Let's dive in.
So earthquakes are real, as we know down here. We feel them all the time, but what causes them?
Yes.
If you think about the Earth as a globe, it's not one solid piece. It's made up of, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, made up of 7 or 8 major pieces that fit together. But they don't fit together nicely, and they don't stay stagnant. And so they are constantly moving, these plates under the ground on which we are sitting. But they don't move in the same direction. They move against each other. So you got these massive plates underneath us. They're moving in opposite directions. And when they move far enough, they slip apart. And that big slip is what releases energy and sends it up to the surface.
And then we're shaking.
Yeah, and where those two plates come together, up above on the Earth's surface, is where you feel it. That's what causes faults.
Yes.
And California is right smack dab on top of the San Andreas Fault, which basically because we sit right at the intersection of 2 major plates.
Yeah, I grew up here in LA area, and let me tell you something. Like, we would see Dr. Lucy come on the TV.
Yeah.
And we knew, you know what, this is a thing, this is happening. You know, what they say is that we sit in this area called the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. What is the Ring of Fire, and where is it?
So, again, these plates, think about the globe made up of these various plates, and the Ring of Fire basically wraps around. Imagine a line starting in Alaska, running down the west coast of North America and down South America, then coming up again through New Zealand, Australia, Japan, back connecting to Alaska on top.
The whole world.
That's where all these faults kind of are mashed up together against one another. And so if you look at a map, you can see where the earthquakes are most happening. It's right along the boundaries of those plates and form basically a circle. And it's the Ring of Fire. Man, California is right smack dab on top of one.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. But that's what keeps, you know, these conversations started, is because it's something that is of top of mind. It's not if but when. A lot of times here, especially in our lovely state in Southern California. I live in the Bay Area, so we get some shakers a lot too.
Oh yeah.
I feel like more times, you know, if it's under 4, no one's really talking about it because we're so used to it at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, to touch on that, I mean, last year alone, we had almost 18 quakes in California alone, Southern California too, for the most part, that were over 4.0.
Wow.
We haven't seen that since 1988.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a lot of movement lately.
So, Glenn, what do you think that is, that we're having all this? Do you think we're getting ready for something?
It's geologic time, man. I mean, it's happened forever, and it'll keep happening forever. These plates, they're just grinding against one another. So the scientists study all this, and they basically come up with models that predict, not precisely, but have kind of an understanding about how often these slips, these earthquakes are going to occur. And what they say is, and there's complete agreement in the scientific community about this, is we're going to get hit by another big one again within the next 30 years to almost 100% certainty.
Yeah.
99.7% certain. 6.7 or greater is going to happen in the next 30 years. Why 6.7? That was the size of the Northridge earthquake.
Yes.
Back in 1994.
I remember that one.
Yeah. Catastrophic, devastating, deadly. It's going to happen again. Almost 100% certain.
Well, let's talk about the Northridge quake, because I remember I was 14 at the time. I remember it very well. It was very scary. Something I'll never forget.
Yeah.
But that really shifted the insurance marketplace when it came to earthquake, because at the time, if I'm not mistaken, earthquake was an included part of most policies, right?
Well, not necessarily included, but since the late 80s, it was a separate policy. It had to be offered if you're selling the homeowners. That's
Yep.
still the law today, mandatory offer. So companies had to offer it if they were going to sell homeowners. They didn't, prior to Northridge, that was kind of fine with them. They didn't really understand the nature of the risk. That all changed on January 14th, 1984,
Yep.
after the Northridge earthquake. And so companies basically were desperate to get this law eliminated so they didn't have to be forced to offer earthquake insurance. The legislature refused to drop the mandate. And so companies then refused to sell homeowners insurance.
Yep.
Just like basically what's happening today, only worse.
Yeah.
And so state had to respond, and they put this thing called the California Earthquake Authority together.
Which is then something that you know a little bit about.
Well,
which is a great segue.
I had the privilege of running the CA for 16 years.
Yeah.
And it's an important organization. But it's a public entity, and it insures earthquakes only, in California only. And so there's only so much it can do, given the way the legislature put it together. So it's an important program, provides coverage. The private sector then steps in to do what the public sector can't, offer greater coverages, different options, more flexible, that sort of thing. So basically what happened real quick was the CA we grew the CA intentionally to the point where it basically got maxed out and could not grow any further without huge rate increases on policyholders.
Yeah.
So CA had to cut back, not offer so much, reduce its financial strength, and do some of those things. Not because we wanted to, but because they had to.
Yeah.
But I think you got companies like Giovera who are saying, but we're here now. You got a private market that didn't exist back then. And it's time for that private market to step up, which Giovera's been doing actually for a number of years, and is actually wrote its first policy the year before CA was created.
Wow.
So there's private sector alternatives, and it's going to be an increasingly important source for people to turn to for earthquake coverage.
Yeah. So it's interesting that still only 10% of insureds in the state carry quake insurance.
Yeah.
Which the only time I ever really have people that like to buy earthquake insurance is somebody else is requiring it, or they got a lot of equity in their house, or they're just the kind of person that loves to buy insurance, which, you know, and nowadays those people, nobody likes the sticker shock of the premiums. But, you know, why don't more insureds buy quake insurance?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons is education. Basically, the client is not really well educated as far as why they need earthquake insurance. One of the tasks that we always implore agents to do is make sure that you make them understand the importance of earthquake insurance. One is going over how it works, what coverages are allowed, what differentiates this compared to a homeowner's policy, and of course, their main investment is at stake, basically making sure that is covered.
So let's unpack the onion of how an earthquake policy actually, how does it work? Is it like a homeowner's policy?
No, actually, it's more of a supplement, or it's an endorsement you can add on to make sure you're covered for a certain peril, which is quake in this case. Homeowners does not carry quake insurance unless you endorse it on there. What we're going to do is, in the case of a major catastrophe, we are going to be the ones that are actually going to come here and assist those clients that will be needing us when that major quake hits.
Right.
So as far as how the policy works is basically we're going to be having either different types of options. We have a combined single limit, which is going to be more of a broad spectrum of covering all lines into one with one deductible. That policy tends to be really good at settlement. In this case, the client will be able to pretty much have that reconstruction done at whatever way he wants it to be. If they don't want to rebuild, want to maybe move out of state because it was just a devastating quake, they tend to go with that policy. We have options on flexible limit, which is more of a line-by-line breakdown, which each line will be treated differently when the catastrophe happens. I mean, maybe the client won't be hit as hard as some would think. We always tell agents this is going to be a catastrophic loss, so they have to make sure they kind of market it as that, as a major loss. Nonetheless, the breakdown policy, they'll be able to pretty much assess every line individually. Like, say, maybe their personal properties, what mainly got damaged, we'll look at that line individually. Maybe there are other structures, maybe pool coverage is what they need.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, other structures is what they need, then that coverage will be looked at separately. So it's more of a line by line. But there are many options out there for agents who pretty much.
And like, what about retaining walls? Because I know those are always a big guy when the earth starts to shake, and is that going to fall under your other structures line?
Well, each policy will be treated in its specific way that it's underwritten, but in this case, other or retaining walls will usually be more of a other structures type coverage. Anything detached from the home will be other structures.
So here's a good question. I've had this asked a million times, and I know the answer, but I want you to answer it. There's a quake occurs, and there's a deductible that needs to be met. And we'll talk about the different types of deductibles and how they are a little bit different than a normal homeowner's policy. How does that deductible apply? Is it taken off the full amount of the dwelling limit, or is it just for what the loss has been sustained?
It's mostly going to be on the settlement. So it's basically, I'll give you an example. Like say you have a $500,000 deduct or a coverage amount. I'll do it on the combined single, which is easier. So $500,000 coverage amount, the client decides to go with the 10% deductible at $50K. Lo and behold, there's a quake, engineer, adjusters go out, settlement is set at $300,000. That $50,000 is taken off the $300,000, meaning that $250,000 is what we're going to use now to reconstruct, get that client back on their feet, so they don't have to pay that deductible.
That's a really good point.
And it's such a good question. I'm glad you raised. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out why more people aren't buying earthquake insurance in California, which is earthquake country, home to 2/3 of the nation's earthquake risk.
Yeah.
And a big one is the concern about the deductible, and not just consumers. Agents many times aren't quite sure how this deductible thing works. And it's understandable, but it's so important to understand it, to overcome a common objection that people have. And it's simply think of it as an amount that's deducted from the covered claim after the loss occurs and the balance gets paid out. No one writes out a check.
Yeah.
And that's a concern that a lot of people have. Where will they come up with that money up front?
Yeah.
They don't.
They don't have to. I think that's such a great point because it's such a top of mind. I mean, it's a percentage. Right. And that's different than most people are used to because usually it's just a dollar amount. And most deductibles for quake are historically on a percentage basis. Same thing you'll find with wind and some of these other type of like hurricane-esque insurance. You're finding the same type of deductible fashion. It's
a percentage.
Yeah.
And people can choose what kind of percentage, what amount of percentage they want in their own policy within a certain range, and that amount then, whatever the percentage they select, is the amount that's deducted from the covered claim. Again. No one writes out a check. They receive the covered benefits, less whatever deductible they selected. Of course, the lower the deductible, the more policy is going to cost because less is going to be deducted, the more the claim is going to be paid.
Yes.
You go the other way too. You basically want to put in catastrophic protection, choose a higher deductible to control the premium costs. All these options are available to consumers, and it's really our job in the insurance industry to help make sure that people are aware of these options and help make sure that agents are out there explaining these important considerations to people thinking about buying.
So, yeah, one of the main deterrents is still that deductible. I mean, why clients don't buy myself. Before I bought a policy, as I saw $200,000 deductible, I was like, I can't afford that, like an auto policy or what have you. Once you explain that, you'll be amazed on how many clients will opt to buy in and make sure they're going to be covered now from that peril.
Well, we were just chatting before we started talking, too, about how the premiums for quake now almost, not in all cases, but in many cases here in where we're at, here in Southern California and even Northern California, it's a little bit less than a standard homeowner's policy right now because the market is so, it's crazy out there.
Yeah, we're not the expensive policy.
Right, you are no longer. I remember going to a session. It was like right in the beginning of like when the wildfire and a lot of these carriers were out, and somebody, I don't remember, maybe it was Palomar. Somebody was on the stage and they said, you know what? We're the only kind of insurance now you can write. Right, and the whole room was like, but it's true. I mean, because it's so hard right now to place property, quake is an easy way to kind of build your book, and a lot of agents are looking for ways to increase revenue because it's a hard time right now. But it's a great time to upsell because if you're not offering quake, I mean, by law, all these carriers have to, but as an agent, if you're not offering it and having a sign off on it, you could potentially have yourself in a little bit of a problem because believe it or not, when an insured buys a policy for one thing, they think it covers everything. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, anything and everything. So having that exclusion signed off or having some documentation when you're, proposing insurance is mission critical.
So important.
Yeah.
When that earthquake happens, they realize it's not covered in the homeowner's policy. You bet. They might be calling the agent. They might be calling their lawyer.
Yeah.
But they're definitely going to look into why wasn't this not more properly explained to me.
Yeah, and GeoVera is one of the things that we've been looking at to make sure that not only are we covering, of course, our clients, but we're covering our agents as well. When quoting in our platform, you're going to be noticing a declination acknowledgement form, which is intended for that, to make sure that you offered the client their coverage to the quake, they declined it. Okay, Mr. Client, please sign off on this. You'll be amazed on, of course, how many clients will contact you back to ensure what they're signing off on. It kind of re-engages the question. Please explain deductibles to me. Please go over how FEMA is going to cover me. So it makes sure that gives you that second process to make sure that they are not going to be declining this coverage of understanding what is at stake at this point.
Well, it's also nice, opening to have the conversation with them, because maybe they're not thinking about it till they have to sign off on not taking it. Yeah. And I think, when you write commercial property, it's not, they don't have to offer it on the commercial property. It's just on the homeowner side, historically. Do you see that they will ever start to make it a requirement on the commercial side?
Boy, I don't know. It would run into strong opposition from the industry that really struggled with the mandatory offer on the residential side, which is why this public program had to be put together. So I don't know. I doubt it in the foreseeable future. And the take-up rate in commercial is as bad or worse as it is on residential.
Yeah, 100%. What do you think about, when we just saw this massive wildfire situation roll out, and, the California FAIR Plan was on a lot of the risk, and, people were like, oh, well, the FAIR Plan's going to go under, they don't have enough money. Well, what do they say to the CEA not having enough money if there was a massive, let's say there's a 9.0 and LA is wiped out? I mean, and what would that look like?
Yeah, well, it could be challenged even at an earthquake less than a 9.0.
Yeah.
There's a financial structure in place at the CEA which contemplates, which includes the money that's collected over time, the reinsurance that it buys to protect itself. It's the largest buyer of reinsurance in the United States and the second largest in the world.
Interesting.
But there's also some other features in the financial plan. The financial structure contemplates a surcharge that will be charged to policyholders in the event an earthquake happens that is going to require people to kick in so that the CA has enough to pay claims. And on top of that, there's an assessment that'll go to insurance companies, like you're seeing now with the FAIR Plan.
Yes.
Right? $1 billion assessment, half paid by the policyholders, half paid by the industry. In the case of the CEA, there's a contemplated $1.7 billion assessment against the companies, which is larger than FAIR Plan, and a $1 billion assessment just against policyholders, which again, twice the assessment that the FAIR Plan.
That's with a B, friends. A B.
Yeah.
Billion.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And it'll take a big earthquake in order for that to happen. But scientists tell us, it could happen today. So
it could happen right now.
Yeah.
Just, buckle up.
Yeah.
Nothing like standing on pins. I don't know what's worse, like a hurricane, a flood, a quake, a fire. I think an earthquake, they just kind of come in and you don't really know. So it's kind of, I don't know.
It's silent and deadly, and you can see a hurricane coming across.
You can at least prepare.
Yeah.
Tornadoes, I think, are pretty wild. Yeah. That one really freaks me out because that just wipes everything out.
Yeah. They come when you least expect it.
Yeah.
San Francisco hit Game 3 of the World Series in 1989, about ready to start.
I know.
What are the odds of the Giants playing the A's in the World Series?
That was my birthday, October 17th. Well, that was my birthday. I was 9 years old. Yeah.
And what are the odds of an earthquake happening right before a game starts when the players are on the field? They can happen at any moment. And it's true what they say. It could happen today. The odds of a really big earthquake are really high in California, the size of Northridge or greater. Over 50% chance of earthquakes, up to 2 or 3 times the size of earthquakes happening in California, both north and south. So these things, you can't scare people into taking action, and these statistics aren't used to frighten people, just to inform them, and they make their own decisions, because there are things they could do to protect themselves, to get prepared, to have the peace of mind knowing they're ready for whatever comes.
Do you think that climate change is having any impact on the frequency that we're seeing, or do you think this is just kind of this one isn't applicable?
This one isn't driven by climate change. It's just the geology, the formations of the crust underneath their surface. So
here's another question, because you're the guy. Why? I don't think that we're really prepared as a state, for a really big one.
No.
I don't think our infrastructure is ready for it. I don't know that, obviously a lot of policyholders aren't ready for it because they're not buying insurance.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we should be thinking about?
That's another great question. And you're right. We're not prepared. Steps have been taken over the years. After a really big earthquake, a lot happens. Building codes get strengthened. All sorts of activities take place. But we got a long ways to go. So all sorts of things that really anyone living in California can be mindful of. Make a plan in advance to know what you do. How would you reconnect with your family if the communications are down? Have a kit. You'd hear people talk about it all the time, but it's so easy to do.
It's a thing. Yeah. You can even buy them already made now.
Yeah, you're right. Just put it in the garage for any sort of disasters.
Yes, indeed.
But be
Maintain it
prepared.
every year.
Yeah.
Be prepared to survive financially. And that's where earthquake insurance comes in. And obviously with 10% of the homes insured, 90% are not. And so we got a lot of ground to cover there.
Yeah, and you think maybe you have your house half paid off. That's your equity. That's your future. That's your legacy. Why wouldn't you want to protect that?
Absolutely.
Hello.
Or even if 100% paid off, or even if you're just getting started. Your home's destroyed, your mortgage is gone, you're throwing the keys. Well, good luck getting another one then. Housing is essential to all of us. Equity that we have in our home is a big part of our life savings.
Yes.
It just makes sense to protect against this risk that is real. It's just impossible to know exactly when and where that's going to
A fair example is the fires that just happened.
Yeah, I was just going to bring it up.
The amount of catastrophe that caused, and how clients are scrounging, looking for a place to live. Obviously, price per square footage has increased out the window. You can only imagine now in the case of a quake, which is going to be most likely 10, 20 times stronger than that. So.
Well, it's also really interesting. I'm working through a client that had a total loss in Altadena, and we're dealing with the carrier was great and paid them, up front for the dwelling amount. Now we're working through the weeds of, debris removal and all. These contractors, one of their bids was over $100,000 for debris removal. And the carrier was like, hold on a second. Everything's inflated and everything's crazy. And having a policy in place, I think, really helps to navigate that, uncharted terrain.
But it's even for people who are insured and have an earthquake policy in place, it's really important for their agent to help them stay on top of that to make sure they're adequately insured.
Yeah.
Jerry, we were talking about that over coffee before coming in here. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Just right now, actually what we've seen in the last couple of months since the fires is an uptick in earthquake sales. And I think it's because awareness is what caused the uptick, making sure clients, they have adequate coverage now on their quake. In this case, I didn't have maybe coverage on my other structures. Let's tackle on, coverage on that and so forth. But it's basically just making sure that, from a selling standpoint, agents should be bringing this up on every homeowner policy that they go by. And it's mainly making sure that they understand that this peril is not going to be covered in the case of the quake. And in that case, let's now look at your spectrum as far as coverage and make sure you're adequately covered. So.
Juvair has a policy that builds in anticipated increase in cost, demand surge after an event. For another policy that does not have that option, you can increase the coverage A amount. Generally, it's tied to the homeowner's coverage A amount, but you can add to that if you feel like I want to protect myself a little bit against this demand surge.
Yeah.
There are ways to take that into account.
So on the commercial side, we see the EQSL limits, the quake sprinkler situation. We also see this building and ordinance situation come up quite a bit on the commercial side of things. What do you recommend there for people that do carry quake on their commercial properties?
Well,
we're talking apartment buildings. I live in San Francisco, and you walk down any hill, street, and you got 5,000 of them, right?
Yeah. So. You're in an area that I do not have expertise in. CA only covered residential. Juvair is a residential carrier. But the thing about commercial apartment buildings or condominiums, building codes have been improved over time. Again, after a big earthquake, people get activated, motivated, and building codes are strengthened. So modern buildings are much more capable of surviving a major event.
Yeah.
Homes, though, older homes, there are things you could do if you live in an older home built, let's say, before 1942. That home is more than likely a disaster waiting to happen because that was built
before it all happened.
Yeah, before engineers really figure out how to do it. So there are pretty simple steps that people can take. If we live in an older home that doesn't cost that much, we can go underneath and tie that home into the foundation more securely and prevent it from slumping off its foundation.
Yeah. I mean, in San Francisco, you got a lot of these, duplexes, triplexes downtown. And, if you've ever seen any of the old footage of even the quake in 1989, I mean, what happens is one of these units goes down and then everything else just kind of catches on fire real quickly. Which brings me to my question about, the concurrent causation, or what happens first, the chicken or the egg, or how do losses, people say, well, I got fire insurance. And so if my building catches on fire or my house catches on fire because of an earthquake, my fire insurance is going to cover it. Not so fast. How do they determine how those losses are paid?
It's an important question. I'm thinking about like Hurricane Katrina, when there was a big debate about was it wind versus fire.
Yes.
In an earthquake situation, the quake policy will cover the shake damage. The fire following earthquake remains the homeowner's responsibility. So the homeowner carrier is responsible for fire loss following an earthquake. The earthquake policy covers the shake damage. And they're not very common that you find a situation where it's impossible to determine what caused the damage.
Right.
So it's not as difficult a matter to figure out as some house that's built on the coast and is wiped out by a tidal surge and you don't know if it's wind that came with it or what.
Right.
It's more determinable in an earthquake situation.
Yeah, and to touch on that is like we get a lot of questions sometimes, does, landslide get covered with quake? Well, no, if it was caused by a seismic activity, then yes, of course, it would be covered. But if it's just the land giving, like Palos Verdes has a big issue with landslide, unfortunately, if it was not caused by a quake, then no, it would not be covering landslide. But yeah, we get those questions a lot.
Landslide's a tough one, man. Ooh, when you're living on those cliffs. I mean, there's a certain amount of, you kind of take on a little bit on your own.
Yeah.
That coastal living, man, it's tough. It's tough. But I think that it's a question to be had, and I'm wondering that when we do have the big guy, if carriers will say, we are no longer going anything related to quake, fire, whatever, we're out, right? And it may only be the quake policy that picks that up. I'm sure there's going to be some way that they'll figure it out to try to not have, because that's a huge, it's going to be a huge blow, the fires following, because, the electrical lines, gas, all that, we know it. We know it happens.
Yes. Yep. The company that put the homeowners policy in place will be responsible for the fire.
Yeah.
Without question.
And they may be out of business if they got too many of them. Here's a question. Speaking about fires, do you think that we're going to see a wildfire only type of rollout like we have a quake or a flood in the state of California? It's a question we keep hearing about.
Yeah. Will it be like a program created?
Yeah. Like that it'll be a standard exclusion like a quake or a flood on a homeowner's policy.
There is the California Fair Plan, and it operates in a way like that. If you can't get coverage elsewhere because you're right smack dab in the fire area, you do have guaranteed access to the Fair Plan, and that's a public program, kind of like the CEA. I don't, in the near future, see another program being created to take on.
They're like, we don't need any more.
Yeah.
So you mean like a separate peril?
Like it would be its own animal, right?
Like a quake policy.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I don't see it in the near future, but
I hear like contemplation of maybe rolling something out like that. How long it's going to take to roll something?
I know
out?
they keep. I think they keep trying to keep us on our keep us excited about it. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but they got to figure it out.
It's a great idea because that's where most companies are having their major.
Well, and they're out of here. They don't want to write.
So having something that works maybe like an earthquake policy, but on the fire side, it would be amazing to have.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about FEMA, because a lot of people think that FEMA is just there to. It's a big mattress that we all can jump on when we need it.
Yeah.
What about FEMA with an earthquake situation? I mean, if you have no insurance, you have nothing going on, is FEMA going to save the day?
Nope. I learned this the hard way. A long time ago when I was commissioner of insurance in North Dakota, we had a massive flood. Grand Forks, the largest evacuation of an American city since the Civil War at that time. And I saw firsthand, trying to help people through that, the difference between someone who had a flood policy and someone who didn't. FEMA came in and provided some help, and provided some cash to get someone through a crisis. But if FEMA, if it's there, is limited, and it does not provide funds to rebuild a home. Maybe put a tarp up on an emergency basis, or maybe provide some funding to subside for a little while. There's a $35,000 cap, and that's not going to rebuild anybody's home in California.
That's definitely not going to save anybody's day.
So the notion that I don't need to be insured because Air Force One's going to fly over and dump out billions of dollars and take care of us all, it's complete false hope, and we need to do what we can to remind folks that it's not good to live on false hope. And then you look at the political dynamics that are at play in our country today, and just talk about getting rid of FEMA altogether. It's some of those crazy things.
And keep in mind, 90% of the population is expecting FEMA to help. And so how long is that going to take?
Yeah, and it's not going to be what you think it is. I think that's the part that we're hearing. I got to ask you, for somebody that was sitting in a, cat moment, being the top dog of the state when it came to insurance, I mean, what was that like?
It was actually challenging, frustrating, exhilarating, and it created in me an interest of figuring out natural catastrophe and helping people prepared for it for the rest of my professional life.
Yeah.
There was only so much we could do. If someone did not have insurance, there was only so much we could do. We'd try to hook them up with FEMA, try to help them a little bit. If they had a flood policy, we could help make sure that it was adjusted properly. If they had a little endorsement on their homeowners policy that provided sewer backup or sump pump failure coverage, we worked to make sure the companies honored that obligation. But it was a frustrating experience. But we did what we could to help.
Yeah, I can only imagine because, like you said, your hands are you can only do so much. But it's also, I think that there's a little bit has to be on the consumer about what they're buying and understanding coverage. And us as agents, it's our job to really help educate our people about what they're buying. But I think there's such a disconnect there in our entire orbit when it comes to insurance.
There is, and there's so many common misconceptions that prevent people from taking a step of getting properly insured. We've mentioned a couple of them here today. The lack of understanding of how the deductible works. The feeling like FEMA's got their back, so they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
There are other things too. If someone lives in this area and they lived here when the Northridge earthquake happened and their home wasn't destroyed, they think, well, I'm good. I lived through that. It didn't hurt my home. But that's also false hope. You've seen one earthquake. You've seen one earthquake. The next one's going to strike at a different place, closer to the surface, closer to their home. Just a few years ago, there was a big earthquake out in Ridgecrest.
Yes,
right?
yes.
7.1.
That was on 4th of July, I think.
The 4th of July.
I always have, I remember the dates.
Absolutely, I do too. And a bigger one the next day is July 5th.
Yep.
And that was 110 miles from Northridge. So that was happenstance.
Yep.
3 times as large as as the Northridge earthquake out at Ridgecrest, or primarily out in the desert.
Yeah.
You slide that earthquake under Northridge. It
would have been devastating.
Today. Yeah. So you can't look at the past to understand where the next one's going to happen. California is riddled with faults. Most Californians live within 30 miles of one, and that's just because we sit right on top of that boundary of those two tectonic plates mashing against each other. So you just got to accept the fact that it could happen today. What I need to do to be prepared in case it happens.
So moving back into the agent mind, how easy is it to get a quote when you're quoting a homeowner's policy for earthquake that you could just submit? How big of a is it? It's not that much more complicated, right?
No. I mean, one thing that Glenn and I were talking about earlier is we're still coming across a lot of agents that don't know about the private sector. They think that CEA is the only product that there is to offer. And no, actually, the private sector right now is playing a big role as far as taking a lot of these clients that maybe don't find a product with the CEA or can really get the coverage they want there. We're filling that void. But as far as the quoting process, I mean, platforms like, say, GeoVera's platform, it takes actually about 8 to 10 seconds to quote.
Come on, that's a no-brainer.
Property address, coverage A, and you'll get a product eligible for that client. You can now tailor your policy, too. You can probably select coverages, decline coverage, et cetera. You can pretty much tailor the product now to a la carte type option for the client. So basically, you can pick and choose, or you can give a broad coverage option like a combined single limit as well.
Right.
It's a really impressive platform. I have to say, having seen a number of them over the years, it's a really, the ease of doing business with Giovera is pretty amazing.
Which is important, because I remember in the old days, you used to have to fill out a little app and send it in and hope somebody on the other side is going to get that.
Yeah.
But now the ways that we can, quote and issue policies is really, it's great, and it helps the kind of the customer experience. But it's also, as your job as agents, if you're not having the conversations about these other lines of insurance, you're setting yourself up for potentially a problem if there is a major, or when there is a major loss. That same goes for flood insurance. And the other one I always have been a fan of is umbrella insurance, because that's the one that people don't think about either.
Yep.
And again, just offering these different lines or having just a simple sign off, I think can be just a nice peace of mind for you as an agent. Your agency's a little bit protected. And also, it might open up a conversation for you to have with the insured about these products that they don't even know that, but they don't know, right?
Yeah. Education's a big process. I mean, that the agents, I think, should be going through it with their clients. And Giovera has an array of products out there and different PDFs that we can offer in order to the agent explain deductibles, go over coverages, and so forth. So they have a good agent resource.
And how big of a deal is it to get hooked up with you guys to be able to sell insurance? Like, if I'm an agent and I don't have an appointment, or I want to learn more about your products, how do I do that?
First of all is, of course, going to the website, giovera.com, getting the application there. Of course, we're not going to appoint everybody. It has to make sense, that you have a product that you're going to be utilizing. But yeah, application process to submitting that would be the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance is not a real sexy topic. Come
on now, guys. Who are you talking to?
You don't see a lot of dinner parties dominated by insurance.
True.
I've always been impressed by how important it is that for the agents to understand the important role they play in a family's life. The family that looks to their agent, trusts their agent, will give them the advice they need to be financially prepared for all sorts of risks: health, life, auto, home. It's really an important responsibility. And as a part of that responsibility in California, it's really important for agents to think about how important it is that they be a conveyor of the importance of being financially prepared for earthquakes. It's a big responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility. And I think, being a part of a family's journey, everybody is always like, well, AI and all this tech is kind of pulling us out of the business. No, it's not. Smart clients like to do business with smart agents. And if you're able to provide them with this information about things that they don't think they need to know, or maybe they do know, but they don't know a lot about, you could be the voice, be the smart person in the room. And if you're not yourself versed on Quake, Giovera offers, I'm sure, some training. I know we, attend a lot of different seminars, and we offer Quake, as a concept for you to kind of understand and educate yourself. I mean, our job as agents is to educate ourselves about these different products, because we need to educate our public, our clients.
And everyone's busy, but they don't need to become a seismologist in order to just understand that we live in California. This is earthquake country.
It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right?
It really is.
We're not asking you to learn about hurricane insurance. Go with what we know about what our cats, wildfire and quake. Those are the things we need to be really versed in.
Yeah.
I think if we're writing property insurance in the state of California. Gentlemen, I can't say thank you enough. I mean, we've really covered a lot of different details. We're going to put some of your information in the show notes so our listeners can get to you. And hopefully, we don't have any big shaking, rattling, and rolling anytime soon. But thank you so much. It's been really great. And I hope that everybody out there is kept up to speed.
Thank you, Samantha.